For my project, I decided to study the number of adults with HIV and compare it to several other factors. I hypothesized that the number of adults living with HIV are increasing in sub-Saharan African countries due to their lack of government spending, income per person, and use of contraceptives. So, what is Sub Saharan Africa? Sub Saharan Africa is a part of the continent of Africa that lies below the Sahara. There are 46 countries that are a part of this region. They include South Africa, Botswana, Rwanda, and much more. Botswana has the highest amount of people living with HIV, and I will talk more about that later in the video. What is HIV? HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus that attacks the body's immune system, specifically T cells, that help the immune system fight off infections. Therefore, people who have HIV struggle with fighting off infection or other types of cancer. The first graph we will be looking at is the number of adults with HIV compared with government health spending per person. So when we look at this graph, we see that in the late 1990s, it starts out pretty even, but as time goes on, we see that sub-Saharan Africa doesn't increase their government spending and their number of adults living with HIV increase. So looking at why the continent Africa has such high levels of HIV, specifically in certain countries such as Botswana and South Africa. As HIV became more prevalent around the world, governments realized they needed to spend more money. However, in Africa, they do not have the resources to do so. When we look at this second graph, it compares adults with HIV related to the income per person. We observe that these sub-Saharan African countries are not making a lot of money, which in result cause them to not have access to help them prevent HIV. So, two reasons why the levels of HIV are high in sub-Saharan African countries is because of their migratory labor economy, according to The Atlantic. This type of economy relies on shifting migrant labor, which makes HIV easier to spread and harder to prevent because of their increased number of sexual partners for a person. This leads into my final graph on HIV and contraceptives. Due to the lack of income per person, it is harder for people to obtain contraceptives, which is causing the spreading of HIV to happen more easily. Now I want to go more in depth into Botswana because they have the largest amounts of adults affected with HIV. This is due to the fact that according to Avert magazine, during 1966 to 2014, their economy was one of the fastest growing in the world and was one of the most stable democracies in Africa. However, their society was weak in terms of influencing policy, and the government makes most of their decisions. In the graphs we have seen previously, their government was not spending a lot of money on working to improve this issue. Not only adults struggle with this issue of HIV, but more specifically women, young people, and female sex workers. However, in Botswana, they are trying to decrease this number by creating the antiretroviral treatment program, which launched in 2002 across sub-Saharan African countries. This program made treatment universal and also free. Botswana was actually the first country to establish a national treatment program. However, in April of 2013, they declared that you could get tested by a boss or an employer and it was mandatory. And this has caused some political problems in the country as people feel that it is taking steps back in the progress that the country has made. However, after looking at all these graphs, I did prove my hypothesis that due to the lack of government spending, income per person, access to contraceptives, and migratory labor economy, they all cause an increase for the number of adults living with HIV in sub-Saharan African countries.